All right, I think we'll be getting started now. Once again, welcome everyone. This is the 2023 Physician Scientist Fellowship Competition's informational session. Just as a quick start off, eligibility exemption requests will be due by November 28th at 5 p.m. And then the actual applications are due January 13th, 2023 by 3 p.m. Eastern Time. As a reminder, whenever you have any questions, you should reach out to ddcf@aibs.org, subject line 2023 PSF, and your last name. Just for a little bit of housekeeping to get us started, all participants are muted and we'll be using the Q&A feature that you'll see on your little toolbar. And this will take place at the end of the informational speaking portion. We'll take questions live from the audience, and then all questions will be compiled and answered by us. In the event that we hit time and aren't able to address everybody's questions, we will respond to unanswered questions via ddcf@aibs.org. Those responses will be emailed out to you. And then also a recording of this session will be made available by the end of this week for all attendees, registrants, and it will also be posted on the award competition's homepage for those who did not attend or register. Just as a brief introduction, the medical research program will be presenting on this competition. We have Sindy Escobar Alvarez, who is the medical program director, and she'll give some background on the foundation and the competition itself. And then I'm Karen Hahn, the medical research program associate, and I'll go over the application, review process, some common errors to avoid, and key dates to keep in mind. Sindy?
Thank you, Karen, and good evening or morning. Thank you for those who are joining us today. And at the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, we support the well-being of the people on the planet for a more creative, equitable, and sustainable future. And we do so by supporting our own museums and centers, as well as grant-making programs in various areas and that are depicted here. So they include the performing arts, environmental conservation, child well-being, the understanding of Muslim and non-Muslim cultures, and through medical research. And the medical research program nurtures the creativity of physician scientists to advance prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of human disease through existing programs, one of which is the Physician Scientist Fellowships. What is the purpose of this webinar? And the Physician Scientist Fellowships aim to enable clinical subspecialty fellows that are finished in their subspecialty training to accrue mentored research experience over a period of research effort protection. Also, through the support of a clinical research project that is foundational to the fellow's vision to improve human health through research in the long term. And at DDCF, we believe that to develop effective ways to prevent, diagnose, and treat human disease, we need to support different approaches to research. We need as much to understand human disease at the molecular level, as well as to know how to implement current treatments or diagnostics to understand how current treatments can be applied or to prevent disease, for example. So we support a wide range of research approaches, and we seek to support future leaders through this program. Now, here's an example of what are leaders, who are leaders of tomorrow. So here's an example of a small subset of our class of 2022. And we continue to make efforts to improve the diversity of our applicant as well as our D group. So if you have any questions about this, please get in touch, and I will pass it to you, Karen.
Thank you, Sindy. So I will briefly go over some main eligibility criteria points to keep in mind, though please do refer to the RFA for the full list of all eligibility criteria. These are just some of the main surface level ones that you should look into. And that is that the PSF is specifically for fellows who must be in the final years of their subspecialty fellowship, as Sindy had mentioned. So for this year, your clinical subspecialty fellowship should end between June 30th, 2022 to July 1st, 2024. And that is inclusive of those start and end dates in that window, June 30th and the July 1st. And please keep in mind that this is specifically about your clinical subspecialty fellowship. This does not, this cannot be replaced by being in like a postdoctoral research fellowship. You can obviously also be enrolled in one of those or have a postdoc or continue on in your postdoc after finishing your subspecialty fellowship. But your postdoc fellowship, those dates do not pertain to the eligibility criteria window that we are looking at. Um, and then another main criterion that you should keep in mind is that you cannot hold a faculty appointment. This includes assistant professors and instructors. However, do keep in mind that if you are a non-faculty instructor, you may apply for an eligibility exemption, as we are aware that some fellowships do appoint their fellows as instructors, but that is not a full faculty position. And also, fellows can then become faculty after the PSF award start date of July 1st, 2023, but you cannot already be faculty or be appointed to faculty before the PSF award start date. Um, and then another point to keep in mind is that you should have completed most of your clinical training. So this is why you should be at the end of your clinical fellowship so that you are able to devote 75% of your time to research. If your fellowship for some reason is structured differently between the research versus the clinical training portion, you may want to apply for an exemption and explain your circumstances there. Some other key points to keep in mind are you cannot hold a K award, and that is individual and institutional awards inclusive. Once you hold the PSF, you can, of course, apply for and receive a K award at any point in time, but not for the purposes of while you are applying. And then for those of you who are looking to apply, many of you are probably currently on a T32, which is fine. But should you receive the PSF, you cannot then concurrently hold the T32 and the PSF award because T32s typically require a full-time commitment. You can reach out to us if you have questions about this. And then finally, I would like to encourage anyone to submit an eligibility exemption if for some reason you are outside of our eligibility window due to things like family leave or extenuating circumstances, or if after having reviewed all the eligibility criteria, you think you have additional extenuating circumstances, then you should submit that eligibility exemption to us by November 28th to be considered. Because all will be considered on a case-by-case basis, and we'll usually review your bio sketch and more details about your background here. If you have a specific question about your eligibility, you should reach out to ddcf@aibs.org so that we can look into it a little bit more. Uh, and then beyond individual eligibility, in terms of institutional eligibility, applicants must work at a US academic institution that grants doctoral degrees and also should have a 501c3 status. Keep in mind that public universities have grant receiving arms that have 501c3 status. So if you work at a public university, we encourage you to get into contact with your grants office to make sure that you get the right tax ID because to launch the online application form, you will need to enter a tax ID right at the start. And this tax ID is then tied to your application. And in the event that you receive the award, that is the institution that receives the grant. So just to avoid like administrative issues, we do encourage that everyone makes sure they are using the correct tax ID tied to the 501c3 arm of their organization. And then just a brief overview of the application process. January 13th, as I said, 2023 at 3 p.m., that is going to be the deadline for all application materials. So that will be your online application form, all the attachments that you must upload to the online application form, and then also the mentorship form and recommendation letter from your primary designated mentor, and also the institutional commitment form from your department chair or your division chief. So everything, including the things owed by the mentor and the department chair, must be submitted by January 13th. And then throughout January to March, there will be the review process. Staff at DDCF will do an administrative review, and then it will go to a scientific peer review. There will be a panel discussion in March, and then in early April, decisions will be sent out under embargo. And then July 1st, 2023 will be the start date of all PSF awards. We do not allow for requests to delay your start date until 2024 or things of that nature. And there will also be a public press release at that point in time. So then briefly, in terms of how proposals are reviewed, I would encourage you to look at attachment 1, which is on page 19 of your RFA. The review criteria is all listed there, and that is also the same criteria that we give to our peer reviewers. Keep in mind the criteria are not the same as the NIH criteria. And broadly, proposals will be looked at for significance, originality, approach, the investigator, and the mentoring and institutional environment. Now I'll go over some of the administrative and process aspects of applying to the PSF award. So in terms of what constitutes a full application, the applicant has to submit their full proposal through our online portal called Giving Data. A link to that is available on the RFA. So there will be an online form, and that collects, your contact information, information about your mentor and chair, and general project information and abstract. And then within that form, you will also upload the following attachments. You'll need to upload your budget, and we have a template for that, which is available online and on the RFA. And then also your proposal as one combined PDF. And that should include all the following information that I've listed here. And keep in mind, this is also listed out for you on the RFA. So you'll want your applicant NIH biosketch followed by your mentor. And if you have a mentorship team, you should include all of the mentors, keeping in mind that it's 5 pages maximum per biosketch. Your career goal and accomplishments, which should be 1 page. And keep in mind that if you are concurrently enrolled in a master's degree program, we ask that you address how the master's degree will help you in your career goals. So under this career goal and accomplishments page, you should address your master's degree if you are currently enrolled to get one. And then there is your research plan, 9 pages maximum. You should include list of citations. There's no page limit there. A mentoring plan, which is 2 pages maximum. Description of resources, 1 page max. And then, if applicable, consultant collaboration or contractual arrangements. And then your budget justification. And then after that proposal PDF, there will be a third upload, and that is your signed assurance form, which there is also a template for that, which you can download from the online form or through the RFA. So as I mentioned, if you want to see that list of everything you need and the order it needs to be in, you should look at page 8 of the RFA, which summarizes everything I just said and gives you all those page limit information. The next thing you need to do is not only do you need to visit the Giving Data online portal, but the applicant should then also visit the SM Apply portal. And this will be the portal where you invite your mentor and chair to complete their confidential support forms. So what happens here is that the applicant visits this site and then sends recommendation requests through this portal to the mentor and the chair. The mentor and the chair are then responsible for their respective forms and must submit them by the same deadline you have, which is January 13th, 3 p.m. Eastern. Keep in mind, the mentor should also be ready to upload their letter of support on this form. And applicants won't be able to see the recommendations and won't see the same forms that the chair and mentor has. They'll only be able to resend the invitation if needed. And we do encourage that you do this well before the deadline and check in to make sure that your mentor and chair accesses this well before the deadline. And also, once your mentor and chair submits, it automatically submits for you, so the applicant no longer has to do anything manually on that side. And just as a little caution, for the SM Apply portal, we do have multiple competitions ongoing right now. As you can see, this is the homepage here, And so just make sure you are clicking on the PSF mentorship form. And if you use the URL that is linked in the RFA, it will take you directly to the PSF competition. And with that, I will also go over a couple common errors we see that you should look to be avoiding. There is on attachment 2, which is page 21 of your RFA, a compliance checklist that we encourage you go through because it is the same list that we will also be looking at when we do an administrative check. So as I mentioned, the designated mentor and chair should be submitting your mentor and chair forms through SM Apply. And note that if your mentor happens to actually also be your department chair, they actually have to complete both of the forms. So you would invite the same person twice under the mentor task and under the chair task. And then also, if for instance, you have a mentorship team, you should designate one mentor to be the person who will go on to SM Apply and provide the recommendation letter and fill out the form. The rest of your team can also provide a letter of support, but you should keep in mind that regardless of if you have a team or only one mentor, the recommendation letter is limited to being 2 pages maximum, regardless of how many people are in that team. And then also, I had mentioned that your proposal PDF does need to be in the same order that we listed all those components. So do check on that. One point that we often see as a mistake is that people do not order their bio sketches correctly. We do ask that you order it so that the applicant's bio sketch is first, followed by your primary and or designated mentor. And then in the event that you have a mentorship team, the other mentors should follow after that. And then other common errors we see are that for the budget, you only need to submit a detailed budget for year 1 out of this 2-year grant period, but you should also submit the summary budget sheet. So if you look in the budget template, there is another tab that says summary budget. So please also make sure you're filling that out and submitting it. You won't need to provide a detailed budget for year 2 just yet, but in that 1-page budget justification that is included in your proposal PDF, you should address the total grant. So talk about years 1 and 2 in the justification. And then another point to note is that in those optional consultant collaboration or contractual arrangement letters, which again is optional, you don't need to have them. In the event that you do have these, please note that they are not recommendation letters and you should not ask them to write them as recommendation letters. And then also for that assurance form that you have to submit, please note that it has to be signed by the applicant and an institutional official. So for the purposes of meeting the deadline, just keep in mind that you do need an institutional official to sign off on the assurance form with you. And also, for the recommendation letter for your mentors, uh, they can refer to the final attachment on the RFA that has instructions on what the mentor can expect in the recommendation form and also what key points that they should be addressing in the letter. So you can refer them to those instructions. And then also, I would caution that if you are a returning applicant, do make sure that you are referring to this year 2023's RFA because we do change some points from year to year. So just to make sure that you are compliant, you should be checking the current year's guidelines. And with that, I'll just reiterate some of the key dates to keep in mind. If you're trying to submit an eligibility exemption, keep in mind that those are due by November 28th, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And the eligibility exemption link is also in the RFA if you're looking for where to find that. And then once those are submitted, we will review and you will receive notice of if you have received an exemption or not by December 1st, close of business, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And then for everyone who is applying, your applications again are due January 13th, 2023 by 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Notification of award will be given by early April 2023. And then your award start date is July 1st, 2023. And then again, if you need to get in touch with us about questions, you can email ddcf@aibs.org with the subject line 2023 PSF dash your last name. And then while we typically recommend that people reach out to us by email, we are committed to making the application process accessible to people. So if an alternative communication means would better assist you in having your questions answered, we urge you to contact ddcf@aibs.org, reach out to us about what accommodations you're seeking, and staff will get in touch with you to provide reasonable accommodation that way if it would be more helpful for the purposes of getting your questions answered. And with that, thank you for listening to the informational portion. We'll be opening it up to Q&A at this point in time. So please enter your questions through the Q&A chat box. And also keep in mind that if you have a very specific circumstance about your eligibility that would require us, to look into your background or review your bio sketch, really the better format here would be to submit an exemption request or reach out with all your details to ddcf@aibs.org so that we have more time to really discuss with you what it is that you're looking for or have questions about. So at this point in time, if you have more general questions, we're happy to address that now.
You, Karen. While you take a look at the questions, thanks, and please put your questions in the Q&A. I just wanted to add that while some of this information may seem repetitive, we do understand that there is a lot of detail in those instructions, and we want to bring it to your attention. There are, as Karen mentioned, compliance checks that we do to make sure that every application is complete, and that is really to make sure that every application has the same parts and can be evaluated all the same by the reviewer. So if an application isn't complete or there's something that's is out of order and we cannot reorder it, or we cannot help you with the compliance issue, then your application may not get reviewed. And we are very mindful of the amount of effort and time that it takes to put together a proposal. So we tried also to alert you of what those things are, including, I think there's a checklist, as Karen may have mentioned, to help you avoid those pitfalls that are really administrative in nature.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy. So the first question is, if you have a K application review pending, can you still apply for the PSF? Cindy, if you'd be willing to take that?
So if you have a key application
Pending.
pending, well, I think this is one where the PSF and a K award you cannot have a K award at the start of the PSF. So if you received a K award before this, as you submit the, sorry, I'm getting tripped here. You cannot have them concurrently, right? Will it preclude your application? No, as long as the K isn't funded yet. However, please bear in mind that your application will be reviewed. It'll go through a whole process. And so at the end, you may have to just withdraw it. And it also represents a load for reviewers who have to review that proposal. So we
Mhm.
ask that you be mindful. It doesn't keep you from applying.
And the second part of the question was, if you get your K, do you have to transition off the PSF to your K? And the answer to that would be no. If you have the PSF and then you get the K and you get a K award at some point while you are already on the PSF, you can keep the PSF, but you have to notify us that you've received a K award. And then we would ask that you not have budgetary overlap. So usually you would have to resubmit a budget so that you don't have overlap there, basically. The next question is, when the mentor and chair submit their recommendations, will the applicant receive any sort of email notification confirming that their step is complete? And yes, you are correct. Each time one of those tasks is completed, you do get an email notification. So you'll get one when the mentor submits, you'll get one when the chair submits, and then once both are submitted, and that counts as a complete submission, you'll also receive a notification there. And at any point in time, if you log on to SurveyMonkey Apply, you can see the status of if something is submitted or not. Let's see, you mentioned common errors with applications. What are fatal errors? Proposals will be returned without review. Cindy, I don't know if you want to comment on this. I
Yeah,
think you did touch on it. There were sometimes when we can't reorder anything or there's just something that can't be stricken. But
right. The other one is, I think something fatal is if something is missing. So there are some, like some about your biographical sketch, for example, may be missing, so that the reviewers cannot evaluate it without it. And there is there is a very narrow window between when the proposals are received, when we review them, and when they get sent to the reviewers themselves. And so we don't have an ability to go back to applicants and say, you forgot to add X or Y or Z part. So we have what we have. So if a part is really missing, that I would say is fatal.
yes. And just obviously, sometimes people still apply and it turns out they aren't actually eligible. So there is also that point, but that is not really a process question. That's more so if you're unsure about your eligibility, we do encourage that you reach out early and soon to discuss. Um, to clarify the point about the mentor letter, this is the next question, by the way. Within the 2-page limit, can the letter be combined and written by multiple people? Yes, of course. That's actually probably more common, especially since there is only the 2-page limit, that if you have a mentorship team, they usually just submit a joint 2-page letter. Uh, the next question is, can you please explain again if postdocs on T32s are eligible? Um, that would be, it's a little bit case dependent because you can, of course, be a postdoc and be on a T32. Many people often are. But the key thing here is that you also have to be either completing your clinical subspecialty fellowship or have recently completed it. Because even if you're on the postdoc fellowship, we are going to look for that clinical subspecialty fellowship end date, and that has to fall between June 30th, 2022 to July 1st, 2024. So, for instance, if you had a clinical subspecialty fellowship and you did end June 30th, 2022, and you are now currently just on your postdoc and on a T32, then yes, you are eligible in that case because you had that clinical fellowship that had the end date within the window. But if you are only a postdoc on a T32 and you have not been in that clinical subspecialty fellowship, unfortunately, you are not eligible.
Yeah, and we realize that that can be a little confusing. So, in terms of provided that a fellow meets that eligibility window, if they're on a T32, they're not precluded from applying. But if they receive a PSF, they cannot continue to hold a T32. Is that right, Karen?
Yes. Mhm. Thank you. Another question here is there a minimum number of first author publications required to apply for this award? And the answer to that is no, there is not.
Thank you for asking that question. I think there's often it feels like the applications maybe, and this is for any peer review. I'm not referring to this one specific, but as an applicant to a grant, it can feel like the the publications are getting measured, or how many have you published. And I will say there is no, for this fellowship award, there's no physician fellowships, sorry, physician scientist fellowships. There is no requirement for a minimum publications or a maximum, and there is no, um, we don't ask reviewers to see, how many publications does somebody have. We ask is, does this person make a case for, is the proposal substantiated on background? Do they seem like they have interest and potential for career and research? And publications are only part of that, right? And we've had, especially since part of the purpose of the grant is to gain research experience. I think that is not, I wouldn't say that unless you have certain number, you're more successful, less successful. But thanks for asking that.
Yeah. And then another person asks, who should be the institutional official to sign off on the assurance form? This is typically just someone, in your grants office or from the Office of Sponsored Projects, really. Because if you look at the assurance form, it's really just attesting to the fact that, yes, you meet the eligibility criteria, you are employed at that institution. So it's really just a standard sign off that you are who you are and you are at this institution.
Right. And some of that may seem like it is not relevant to the application to the research proposal, but we understand that these are actually important checks on our end and sometimes also on the institution's end to make sure that they're aware that you're applying to this. So that's another of those fatal flaws, that are not fatal errors that if that is not submitted, an application could risk not being reviewed.
Yes, thank you. And then another question is one of the initial slides on eligibility states that the graduation date should not be before June 2022. I graduated on June 2022 and now started as faculty. Am I eligible? People graduate from fellowships and start working as faculty. Um, I think Sindy, you can chime in on this as well. But if you complete your fellowship in June 2022 and immediately are promoted to faculty, unfortunately, I don't think you would be eligible because you cannot be faculty prior to the PSF award start date.
I agree with you, Karen. And I think also, I think it's great if you transition to faculty, then you really don't, you had enough experience to transition to faculty, then the award wouldn't we wouldn't consider that to be, the purpose of a grant wouldn't be met there. But um, we are aware of fellows who will need to do research for a number of years before becoming faculty.
Mhm. Thank you. For fellows on an ABIM research pathway, eligible at time when clinical commitment goes from 90% to 10%, or at the final end of the fellowship, which includes some years of 90% research time. Um, I'm not entirely sure I understand this question. I would encourage you to reach out with additional details to ddcf at aibs.org. But in general, typically when you should be applying for the PSF should be near the end of your fellowship time, because at that point in time, this is when most people are done with all of their clinical training and they have that usually like around a year to devote to research. So that's usually the time when people are applying. If for some reason you're in a specific pathway that is different or has different requirements, we do encourage you to reach out to us and we can advise on if an eligibility exemption is needed. Another question is, can you confirm what the chair must complete versus what the mentor must complete? Yes. So the tasks are different. They're both through the same portal, but they will receive different forms. The chair form is really just an institutional commitment form where they will basically guarantee that you know they will provide 75% protected research time in the event that you receive the PSF award. The mentorship form will ask for information about the mentor, what is their experience like, what is their experience in mentoring and what types of funding does the mentor themselves have? And then at that point they will also upload the recommendation letter.
Yes, Elsa, and also um, when the applicant goes to a portal and indicates the email address for the chair and the mentor, each of those individuals will get an email with a link that's specific to that applicant. And so when they click on it, they get access to the specific form. And only the mentor fills out a form and uploads a letter with it. But the chair is really just a form.
Mhm. Yes. And again, so if your mentor is your chair, you need to invite them to do both tasks because those are separate forms and they need to do both in the event that your chair is your mentor. Um, Oh, there was another question about the institutional official who should be signing the assurance form, which we did already answer. So typically, this is someone like a grants officer from your grants administration office or someone from your office of sponsored projects. As Sindy mentioned, this is largely an administrative check on our end and to be sure that your institution is also aware that you are applying for this award. Um, Another question is, could you speak more to the particular topic area or range of areas sought by the RFA? I know you mentioned full range of basic to clinical, but are there any other details? Sindy, I think if you'd like to weigh in on this.
Sure, Karen. So there is no specific topic area or range of areas that the request for application seeks to fund. They all, we receive them and make sure that we have the appropriate expertise in the external review panel to make sure that every application is reviewed as fairly as possible. And I think it's also a hint to the applicants that um, try to make sure that your applications can be um, read and understood by somebody who may be in your general area of research, but not necessarily in your specific field of research, because it needs to be very clear to a scientist who reads it. And what we have supported over the last, this is the fifth competition that we're launching, but over the past 4 years is what rises to the top. So there is no selection of topic areas or approaches. We just look at what are the criteria are in the request for applications that we share with the reviewers, but what is an important project that is well grounded in evidence to address a clinically significant research question.
Thanks. And I think Cindy already began to answer the next question, which should research plans be written for a reviewer with some specialty knowledge? Example, are oncology proposals reviewed by oncologists or cancer biologists, or for a general physician scientist reviewer audience without specific subject matter expertise? Um, so yeah, Cindy kind of touched on this. For the scientific review panel, we do largely, try to assign proposals to people who are in the same specialty area, but you should try to keep it a little bit more general for a physician scientist reviewer because, since we do accept a broad range of disease areas and research types, there's no guarantee that, you'll have all the same specialists looking at your specific proposal. Another question is same question as for if you have a K award. If you have an F-32 application pending, are you eligible to apply for the PSF? And can you be on the F-32 while you are on the PSF? Thanks for this question. I think similar to the K award, I suppose you could have an application pending, but you should keep in mind that much like a T-32, you cannot concurrently hold an F-32 if you receive the PSF because the F-32 also requires a full-time commitment. So in this actual case, maybe Cindy, you can also chime in here, but I don't, since you can't hold both the F-32 and the PSF, specifically in your instance here, if you were to receive the F-32, I think you would have to pick.
I agree, Karen.
Um, this next question is about an administrative supplement. I think for the purposes of this Q&A, I would ask that you submit your question and the details here to ddcf@aibs.org because I think we'll need a little bit more background on your question. So this is to Brian, who asked about the NIMH Administrative Supplement Program. Please feel free to follow up with us after. And then another person is asking about recording. And yes, a recording of the webinar will be posted on our website by the end of this week. Another question about the administrative supplement program from NIMH. I would recommend that you reach out to us privately. The next question, in your research plan, can you describe a long-term project that goes past the 2-year funding period, but clearly describe what you aim to accomplish in the 2-year funding period? Cindy, if you'd like to take that one.
Sure, glad to chime in. So certainly we realize that in many, hopefully in most instances, there is a longer term vision that you're heading towards. It should be clear what the scope of the project is that would be covered in those 2 years. Um, so I guess that's a short way to answer a question. If there is anything more that you would like us to consider, please get in touch, um, so we can give you a more detailed answer, or if this didn't address it.
And the next question is, can you comment on how 75% protected research time might change the timeline to finish the clinical fellowship? Um, well, really, typically when people apply, they're already just about at the end of their fellowship. So I guess I don't know that this should change your end date really, because by the time you're applying for the PSF, generally it's a time when people are focused on research anyway. I don't know, Cindy, if you had anything else to comment, but
No, I think that's right.
okay. And then the next question, are fellows training at NIH eligible since the institution does not grant PhDs? Cindy, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, this is a new question, I think. I guess we don't know. We would need more background to understand where you would be after. If you would still be at the NIH, we certainly, um, if somebody is not at an institution that grants doctoral degrees, and that could be MDs or PhDs or other, um, then they're not eligible. But please follow up if you think that there's more that we need to consider in answering this question.
Yes. And then the next question, am I correct in thinking there's no limit to the number of applications that can be submitted from one university? Thanks for that question. Yes, there are no limits. Since each individual applies on their own, there's no nomination process through the university or anything like that. So feel free to submit as many applications as you want from a given university, is basically the answer there. Regarding the department chair letter, if the department chair does not know the applicant well, is that okay from an application perspective? Um, the the chair is not actually submitting a recommendation letter, so I think it would be fine. Really, all they are really doing in this form is saying that they are guaranteeing protected research time for you. It's not a recommendation letter, and you won't be judged on those grounds. The next question, if you're in a clinical subspecialty fellowship that is not an official fellowship with a certifying body, are you eligible? Um, on the online application form, it does ask if there is a certifying body, uh, but there is no actual criterion this year that, this be an ABMS certification or anything of that nature. I would encourage you to follow up with us at ddcf@aibs.org, just to let us know what the fellowship is. Um, but since there is no actual strict criterion this year, I don't think that this would necessarily preclude you. But feel free to reach out to just explain the background there, just so we understand a little bit more.
And also, I would like to add to the previous question about if your chair doesn't know you very well. Um, we do recommend and imagine that this is something you all will do. That when you ask whether your chair might be familiar with you or not, is to alert them and discuss with them that this is something you are going to do, right? Because the chair has an option in that form to say, no, I do not grant the 75% protection for this applicant if they get the grant. Um, so make sure that they are aware and that they are supportive of these, so that you don't, this is again another thing that could make somebody ineligible, is if their chair is unwilling to give that time protection. Um, Even if we have a full application and everything, and you put together, you put in the effort, um, that application wouldn't be considered.
Yes, thanks for that follow-up information, Cindy. The next question is, with respect to not being eligible if you have a faculty position, um, are faculty positions that are clinical assistant professorships and non-tenure tracks still considered ineligible? And unfortunately, the answer is yes. You would still be ineligible. It's a blanket ineligibility if you have a faculty position, unfortunately. And then the next question is, can applicants expect to receive any reviewer feedback at the close of the review process? Thanks for asking this question. Yes, we do provide de-identified reviewer comments if those are available for your proposal. And typically we'll send that out, I'd say in May. So yes, is the short answer. We do like to provide feedback so that you can improve your own grant writing.
However, we do provide it as available, something that is suggested and asked from the reviewers. So if we provide the comments to the extent that we have them available as well.
Yes. Um, and then another question is to clarify, is the primary mentor writing the letter of recommendation, the mentorship form, and the mentoring plan? Um, yes, your primary mentor needs to upload the letter of recommendation. So if it's just from them or it's in concert with the mentorship team, yes, they are responsible for the letter. And yes, they are also the ones that fills out the mentorship form that is on that separate portal. And then the mentoring plan, that is actually in your proposal PDF that the applicant is responsible for uploading. Um, and that should not be the same as the letter of recommendation. I would say the mentoring plan is something you talk over with your mentor, just to make sure that you both have a plan together. So your mentor should be involved in that. But that portion, that last portion you're asking about, the mentoring plan, that actually goes in your proposal PDF and you're responsible for uploading it. So I wouldn't necessarily say the mentor is writing that. And then another question is, other than the K, are there other awards that cannot be held concurrently with this award? So actually, the K award, you are allowed to hold that with the PSF. You just can't have a PSF. I mean, you just can't have a K award while you are applying for the PSF. The awards that you cannot hold concurrently with the PSF are the T32 and the F32. Um, Holding a K award is fine. And then we don't really have other restrictions on holding concurrent awards. Generally, you will just have to notify us of any other awards you are receiving and whether there's scientific or budgetary overlap. And if there's budgetary overlap, we work with you to make sure that you submit a new budget. So really, I would say the only restriction is the T and the F. Another question is, you read that research involving animal tissues are not accepted, but seems like research involving human tissues or samples are okay. And the answer to that is yes, that um, human-based research is fine and is what is accepted. Um, Another question is, you mentioned to include how a master's degree is helpful to the career goal statement. Does that mean a master's degree tuition can be included in the budget portion of the application? I would say, and Cindy, correct me if I'm wrong, that no, a master's degree tuition cannot be budgeted on your PSF award because that should be to support the project or your own salary.
I agree with you, Karen. I think
Another
also
question. Oh, go
sorry,
ahead.
the reason we ask this is that we know that it takes time and effort to be concurrently enrolled in a master's program. So if you are, we ask that you share how that fits into everything since time is limited.
Yes, thanks. Another question was, how many applicants apply per year and how many grants are awarded? So we typically award 10 grants, and that is probably what we're looking at for 2023 as well. And then in terms of how many applications we get, I'd say we usually average around 50 or so. Another question was, should applicants anticipate receiving reviewer feedback? We did already answer this question, and the answer to that is if reviewers have offered to provide comments, then yes, we will provide de-identified comments on your proposal. Generally, you can expect that to happen around May. Another question is there a limit of one proposal application per applicant? And the answer is yes. Each applicant should only be submitting one project proposal to us.
Right. And
And
the
then,
reason we ask for only one application is because this is an individual award, right? It's something to help the individual grow the research skills, advance the research vision. And so proposing different projects, I don't think is something that, we were asking you that you look at the review criteria for what we'll be looking for, the reviewers will be looking for, and assess what project do you think would best meet the goals of the award.
yes. And then there is also, if you transition to a faculty position on July 1st, 2023, are you eligible to apply? And I would say, unfortunately, that would be counted as ineligible because that restriction on holding a faculty position is inclusive of July 1st, 2023. You can become faculty through the course of the PSF award, but you cannot become faculty prior to and inclusive of the start date of July 1st, 2023. And then, is there a limit on the number of times an eligible applicant can apply? I think this person's probably talking about applying in subsequent years, and we do welcome applicants, returning applicants, provided that you continue to meet the eligibility criteria. So if you did apply in 2022 and are interested in applying this year, it's fine. We treat every application every year as a brand new proposal, and we don't take into account if you've applied with us before. Great. And with that, it looks like we've gone through all the questions and we're close to time anyway. So thanks everyone for sticking around, asking your questions. If you have additional questions or you have something uh, particular about your eligibility, then again, you should reach out to us at ddcf@aibs.org. Other than that, thank you for your time and attention and best of luck with applying. Thank you, everyone.